You were taught human civilization's timeline is a straight arrow, rising from primitive savagery to the absolute peak of modern technology. You believe the ancient world's greatest wonders were built by pure muscle power, the sweat of thousands of slaves and crude bronze chisels. That is the lie-safe story to lull us. But here is the paradox. A crack in the foundation of mainstream history. You cannot cut quartz-bearing granite with bronze tools in terms of geological physics. That is simply impossible. Bronze is far softer than granite. Attempting it is like trying to cut a diamond with a piece of rotten wood. My promise in minutes. We tear down this veil to reveal true technical blueprints, evidence of matter manipulation. Even 21st century engineers would fear. Imagine running your hand along the cold surface of a casing stone at Giza. It is not just flat, it is optically flat. The gap between these blocks is so small that a razor blade, or even a beam of light cannot pass through. This is not random polishing. This is machine precision. Have you wondered if impossible is just a word for technology we cannot understand? So before getting comfortable, please like and subscribe, but only if you find the journey we are about to take truly valuable. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from now? Let's travel back and deconstruct the story of a lost world. Look closely at the cuts on the basalt at the Giza Plateau. Modern materials science tells us a disturbing truth. To leave such regular spiral grooves, the bit must penetrate rock with a feed rate 500 times faster than our best modern diamond drills. With crude tools, the drill wears out before scratching the surface. What you see is not patience. It is the signature of technology. We are speaking of giant circular saws 10 meters in diameter, or perhaps high-frequency ultrasonic machining that softens rock at the contact point. Compare this to Rome masters of arches and concrete. Romans were engineers of chemical durability and social scale, manipulating the landscape. But the Egyptians, they played with solid matter structure. Why do museums display crooked bronze chisels beside perfect diorite vases harder than steel? That is the contradiction. We are viewing a crime scene where the weapon does not match the wound. These ruins are not mere tombs. They are stone machines, functional structures machined with aerospace engineering tolerances. We are not just comparing to civilizations. We are comparing to different physical sciences, one optimizing chemical reactions, the other apparently mastering the cutting of matter with energy. Let your eyes adjust to the darkness as we step inside the heart of the Great Pyramid. Here is where the mainstream story begins to crack completely. You were told this is the world's most glorious tomb, a monument to a dead pharaoh's ego. But look around, what do you see? No mummies, no hieroglyphs, no decorative art, only the cold, brutal precision of engineering and tons of red Aswan granite transported from 800 kilometers away. If this is a tomb, it is the strangest tomb ever built. But if this is a machine, then everything suddenly becomes perfectly logical. Touch the walls within the king's chamber. Feel the vibration? This granite contains up to 55% silicon dioxide quartz crystals. In modern physics, we know a fundamental property of quartz, the piezoelectric effect. When you compress quartz, it generates an electric current. And this structure, with 6 million tons of limestone weighing down on the inner granite chambers, is not a random pile of rocks. It is a massive compression machine. The pyramid was not built to house death. It was designed to harness the Earth's life seismic and electromagnetic energy. Look up at the ceiling of this room, 9 massive granite beams, each weighing 70 tons, stacked in damping layers. Archaeologists call this a gravity-relieving structure, but an acoustic engineer will tell you something different. This is a giant resonator. They are tuned to oscillate in sync with a specific frequency, perhaps the Earth's resonant frequency or the planet's heartbeat. When seismic vibrations from below move up through the limestone acting as an insulator, they enter these granite chambers and activate the quartz. The entire structure begins to sing at an infrasound frequency your ear cannot hear, but your body perceives as a primal fear. And the empty granite sarcophagus in the corner, it never held a body. Its dimensions possess precise harmonic proportions. Imagine it not as a box, but as a lens or a capacitor, where energy concentrates before being released. The ancient Egyptians were not worshipping these stones. They were operating a solid-state power plant. Compare this to what we know of later Rome. Rome was the master of physical flow water, soldiers, goods, but the builders of Giza were masters of invisible energy flow. They weren't just stacking stones. They were constructing a massive geological circuit board. The slots in the Grand Gallery were not for decoration or sliding stones. They were rails for Helmholtz resonators, turning the entire corridor into a colossal microwave waveguide aimed at the stars. We are standing inside a device modern humanity has only begun to dream of, a zero-point energy collector, abandoned and disconnected thousands of years ago. Leave the mysteries of the Egyptian desert and move fast through space and time to the heart of the Roman Empire. Here, we find a completely different technology, not sound or energy manipulation, but alchemy on an industrial scale. You look at our modern skyscrapers of glass and steel today. We proudly call this the peak of civilization, but the brutal reality is, modern concrete Portland cement is designed to die. It lasts about 50 years before cracking from inside. We build to replace, but the Romans, they built to defy eternity. Stand before the dome of the Pantheon. It has stood for nearly 2,000 years, unreinforced, enduring earthquakes, wars, and the ravages of time. How is this possible if they were just simple masons? The answer lies at the microscopic level, a field called nanotechnology. The Romans didn't just mix lime and volcanic ash randomly. They discovered a precise chemical formula, a complex molecular reaction. The secret is pozzolana volcanic ash from the Bay of Naples. When mixed with quicklime and seawater, a reaction begins. It doesn't stop when concrete dries, it continues reacting for centuries. They created a rare crystal structure called a luminous tobermorite. In the modern world, we synthesize this in labs with extreme heat. The Romans created it at room temperature on site. Think about this. Roman concrete acts more like a living organism than dead rock. When a crack appears from seismic shock, rain or seawater seeps in instead of eroding the structure. Water activates dormant tobermorite crystals inside the mixture. They wake up, grow, and spread into the crack, self-healing the wound by recalcifying the stone structure from within. This is a chemical immune system built into the architecture. Do you realize the irony here? We, with computers and labs, live in rusting, crumbling cities, while Roman harbors soaking in corrosive seawater get harder over time. They didn't fight nature, they invited nature as an ally, using the very corrosion of seawater to reinforce their fortresses. This isn't just construction, it's molecular mastery we forgot. While Egypt looked to the stars with laser precision, Rome looked deep into Earth's chemistry, turning stone into something immortal. Follow me underground, into the suffocating and dark labyrinth of the Serapeum at Saqqara. If the Great Pyramid is a proud statement to the sky, the Serapeum is a buried dark secret. Here, in narrow niches carved deep into the limestone bedrock, we find boxes that make modern mechanical engineers lose sleep. We are talking about over 20 chests of black granite and diorite, each weighing up to 100 tons including the lid. History textbooks will tell you these were coffins for the sacred Apis bulls. But pause for a moment. Have you ever seen a bull mummy inside one? Never. They were found completely empty. And when you look at their precision, the tomb hypothesis becomes absolutely ridiculous. Bring a machinist square and a high-intensity flashlight. Place the square's edge against the box's inner corner. What do you see? No light passes through. The deviation is zero. The inner walls are perfectly flat and absolutely parallel. In modern engineering, to achieve this flatness on 7 to 8 Moss hardness material, we need massive computer-controlled CNC machines. We would require diamond cutting heads and continuous laser measurement systems. To replicate this today, the hardest problem lies in the internal corner. Imagine holding a chisel and hammer. How do you create a sharp 90-degree angle where 3 planes meet inside a box 2 meters deep? In a cramped space where you can barely swing a hammer physically, a rotary tool always leaves a curved radius. But here, the corner is so sharp it seems the stone was machined by subtractive manufacturing technology. It defies the physical limits of hand tools. It is as if someone programmed a force field or an energy beam to scoop the granite out like scooping ice cream. Why need this optical grade precision for a corpse? You don't need micron tolerances to bury a bull. You need that tolerance to contain pressure, radiation, or toxic fluids. The lids were cut with the same precision. When closed, the air inside is forced out, creating a permanent hermetic seal. The Egyptians at the Serapeum were not sculpting art. They were manufacturing safety containment vessels. Geometric perfection here is a function, not a style. While Romans built an empire by adding material, the nameless workers at Serapeum demonstrated absolute power by removing material with supernatural control. This is evidence of a science understanding spatial geometry at a level we are only just beginning to recreate with computers. Shift the lens from the mysterious stillness of Egypt to the brutal movement of Rome. If Egyptians were surgeons using laser scalpels on stone, Romans were giants wielding sledgehammers. They were ready to smash the terrain to serve their will. We often romanticize aqueducts. We see them as humanitarian civil works bringing clean water to cities. That is half the truth. In a systems engineer's eyes, the Roman water network was actually a continental-scale kinetic machine. Look at Las Medullas in Spain. This was not an ordinary gold mine, it was a crime scene. It was the scene of a brutal geological attack. The Romans did not dig soil with shovels. They used a technique called ruina montium, which literally translates to the ruin of mountains. Its operating principle works exactly like a modern high-pressure hydraulic system. First, Roman engineers drilled hundreds of narrow tunnels deep into the mountain. Then, they diverted rivers from dozens of kilometers away. They channeled water into massive reservoirs sitting at high altitudes above the mining site. When the command was given, they opened the floodgates. Thousands of tons of water crashed down. With immense potential energy, compressing air inside the narrow tunnels, pneumatic pressure skyrocketed instantly. Combined with the water hammer effect, creating a shockwave from within, the result? The mountain didn't just erode. It exploded. Millions of tons of rock were torn apart, revealing the gold veins inside. This is primitive terraforming technology. They completely wiped entire mountains off the European geographic map. The scale of this is terrifying. Imagine designing a water conduit system hundreds of miles long, with a precise gradient of just centimeters per kilometer, not for drinking, but as an industrial weapon. If Egypt amazes us with preservation and eternity, Rome terrifies us with the ability to alter habitats. They did not adapt to the Earth, they forced the Earth to adapt to them. The Roman aqueduct system is the ancestor of the modern electrical grid. Instead of electrons in copper wire, they used water moving through stone. Potential energy of water was converted into work to grind grain, to saw wood, crush ore, and wash away rock. It was a fully automated hydraulic energy economy. Looking at the massive scars left at Las Medullas today, you don't just see an old gold mine. You are seeing traces of a Type 0.8 civilization trying to rise to Type 1 by manipulating the region's hydrosphere. Now, we must face the elephant in the room of physics, gravity. This is the final limit to which every engineer must bow. But when you look at Egypt, it seems this limit never existed. Let's return to the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid. We discussed its energy, but let's talk about how it got there. 70-ton granite beams were lifted 50 meters above the ground. Textbooks talk about mud ramps and pulleys, but do the math. To build a ramp with a feasible slope for that mass, you need a volume of material larger than the pyramid itself. And how do you maneuver those massive blocks around tight corners? At the top of the tower without collapsing the scaffolding, Newtonian mechanics collapse here. This suggests a shocking possibility. The Egyptians didn't lift stone as we understand it. They changed its state. If they understood the resonant frequency of stone. As we discussed in part 2, is it possible they used acoustic technology to create acoustic levitation? We do this in labs today with small particles using sound waves to overcome gravity. If you scaled that up, massive stone blocks could have been moved as if made of styrofoam. They didn't fight gravity. They turned it off. This is the manipulation of inertial mass. Conversely, look at Rome. They didn't seek to erase gravity, but they sought to trap it in a geometric cage. The Pantheon Dome remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Stand beneath the oculus, the eye of the Pantheon. It is a 9-meter diameter hole right at the apex, the only window to the sky. Why doesn't it collapse? Because the Romans performed a feat of material engineering we call density grading. The base of the dome is mixed with heavy basalt for stability, but as the dome curves upward, they changed the formula. They mixed concrete with light porous pumice until the apex was so light it almost floated. They created an artificial sky of concrete, confining space inside a perfect sphere. The contrast here is absolute. Egypt represents penetration. They moved solid matter through space, as if the laws of physics were suspended. Rome represents enclosure. They used physical laws so skillfully to the extreme to create empty space. One is the technology of God's force field manipulation. The other is the technology of giants' stress force manipulation. Both achieved the impossible, but in opposite directions of the physical spectrum. When you stand under the oculus and watch rain fall onto the marble floor, you are not just seeing architecture. You are seeing a miniature model of the universe, held together not by magic, but by absolute understanding of compression and weight. Knowledge we lost for centuries to relearn. Finally, let's take a step back to view the panoramic scale of this giant picture. We spent time comparing Rome and Egypt as competitors on a technical leaderboard. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if they were not inventors, but actually air survivors trying to piece together the fragments of a shattered global legacy? Look at the strange phenomenon archaeologists call technological devolution in Egypt. The most perfect, precise, and grandest pyramids.
It is forgotten.
At Giza are the oldest ones. Pyramids built in later dynasties centuries later are smaller, cruder, and today have collapsed into shapeless piles of rubble. Why did technology go backwards? By natural laws of development, knowledge should accumulate and improve over time. This sudden drop in quality suggests ancient Egyptians didn't develop this from zero. They inherited it, used it, and then gradually forgot how to operate it. My hypothesis is both empires held different pieces of a master blueprint from a lost ancestral civilization, a Type 1 civilization that existed before the catastrophe of the last ice age. It seems Egypt inherited the hardware, energy schematics, sonic stone cutting, and sacred geometry to interact with the universe. Meanwhile, Rome inherited the software and infrastructure, knowledge of material chemistry, massive hydraulic engineering, and the social organization ability to maintain a complex system. Look at the global evidence. Polygonal masonry walls where massive blocks fit together without rows, but perfectly tight are found not just in Egypt or Italy, but also in Peru, Turkey, and Japan. They are identical in technical style and earthquake resistance. Despite being separated by thousands of miles of ocean and thousands of years of mainstream history. This is no coincidence. This is the fingerprint of a common architect. Both Rome and Egypt are loud echoes of a silenced scream. They are like children playing in the ruins of giants, using tools they only partially understand. Romans concreted the world to mimic nature's eternity. Egyptians polished stone to mimic machine perfection. We are not watching the peak of a beginning. We are watching a desperate effort to save remnants of a high physical science, wiped from human memory. And the question haunting us tonight is not who built it better, but who taught them those things before vanishing. When the dust settles on these majestic ruins, what remains? A deep humility and a vague fear. We often look back with modern arrogance, viewing ancestors as superstitious, who only knew how to pull stones with ropes and muscle. But the silent granite at Giza, the laser cuts at Serapeum, and the self-healing concrete of the Pantheon are laughing at that arrogance. We built our civilization on fast consumption, replacing durability with speed, harmony with nature with brutal exploitation. Their technology was not backward. It followed a different physical path focused on resonance, eternal durability, and direct connection with earth and sky energies. Perhaps our true task in the 21st century is not to blindly rush forward to invent the future, but to stop and remember the past. The blueprints are still there, hidden in stone, waiting for us to be mature enough to read them again. True progress sometimes is finding what was lost.